Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're building a definitive briefing on a really challenging, emerging pathogen that honestly every clinical microbiologist needs to have on their radar, Inquilinus limosus.
Okay, let's just start with the name because it actually tells you so much of the story. Inquilinus basically means a sojourner, an inhabitant of a place that isn't its own. And limosus? That just means full of slime. It's the perfect description for an organism that loves to set up shop where it doesn't belong, especially in the cystic fibrosis lung.
And a quick heads up, all the information we're about to go through was compiled from a Gemini's deep search. If you want to really get into the weeds and check out the primary literature, the full list of citations is waiting for you in the accompanying notebook document.
So what's the big deal with this gram-negative bacillus? Why do we need to be watching it? Well, it's pretty much a perfect storm. It's an opportunistic bug, it's multidrug-resistant, and to top it all off, it is notoriously difficult to detect with our standard lab protocols.
So you've got this dual threat, right? It's like a ghost in the lab, super hard to find, and a real monster at the bedside. Its presence has been linked to a rapid decline in lung function for some patients, making it a serious clinical concern.
Okay, let's put on our lab coats and head to the bench. The big question we have to ask ourselves is, why do our standard, tried-and-true protocols so often completely miss this pathogen?
The answer, it turns out, isn't just one simple thing. It's actually a whole cascade of deceptive characteristics that create a perfect storm for diagnostic failure.
Now this slide really lays out the diagnostic trap. Just follow the path here. First off, its super slow growth means we're probably going to toss the plates at the standard 48 hours, long before it even shows up. Then, if it does grow, its slimy mucoid look can make you think it's just Pseudomonas aeruginosa. But here's the real kicker, the growth pattern on selective media. It grows on BCSA but not on MacConkey. That pattern screams Burkholderia cepacio complex, which, as you know, has massive implications for infection control and cohorting patients.
So when you see this very specific combination of characteristics, that should be a major red flag going up in your lab. A slow-growing, supermucoid, oxidase-positive, gram-negative rod that loves BCSA but completely snubs MacConkey agar, that exact profile should immediately make you think, okay, time to move beyond the basics and get a definitive ID.
And that's our cue, right? Since the standard phenotypic and biochemical tests are so unreliable, we absolutely have to turn to molecular methods to really unmask this organism.
Now, when we open up the molecular toolkit, the power of PCR really stands out. It's so much more than just a confirmation tool, it can be a primary diagnostic. I mean, think about this. In one documented case, PCR picked up Inquilinus limosus a full 3 months before a culture finally grew it, all while the patient's lung function was starting to drop. That's the power of this kind of tool. It can give us a critical head start on detection and intervention.
Okay, so we found it. We have a definitive ID. Now what? What does this actually mean for the patient? Well, the clinical impact is pretty significant, and it's multifaceted.
This slide shows perfectly that Inquilinus limosus is an active participant in lung damage. It can literally hide inside our own cells to evade inflammatory signals. And get this, when it's co-infecting with other pathogens like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, it can actually ramp up the formation of those neutrophil extracellular traps or nets, those webs our immune cells cast out. But in this case, it just makes the lung pathology worse. This bug is not a bystander. It actively drives the disease.
Which of course brings us to the most critical question for the entire clinical team: how on earth do we treat it? And that question is defined by its predictable but very challenging resistance profile.
This resistance profile isn't something it picks up along the way. It's hardwired into the organism's chromosomes, driven by efflux pumps and beta-lactamases. And the really critical one to notice there is its resistance to colistin, a key last resort antibiotic for so many other CF pathogens. This makes Inquilinus limosus predictably, and pretty worryingly, difficult to treat right out of the gate.
Okay, this is absolutely crucial for every single microbiologist watching. You cannot categorize this organism as S, I, or R. There are no species-specific EUCAST clinical breakpoints. 0. Using surrogate breakpoints like the ones for Pseudomonas aeruginosa is not just unvalidated, it's a risky practice that goes against all EUCAST guidance.
So what do? You followed this guidance to the letter. You report the raw quantitative MIC value, and you add that comment explaining that there are no breakpoints. This is absolutely essential. It promotes good antimicrobial stewardship, and it makes sure the clinical team is making decisions based on the raw data, not a potentially misleading interpretation.
So how is it actually being treated? Well, as you can see from these case reports, we're kind of operating without a net here.
There are no formal international or Dutch guidelines. Clinicians are relying on anecdotal reports like these, which typically involve prolonged, multi-drug regimens using heavy hitters like carbapenems and fluoroquinolones. And even then, as the outcomes show, actually achieving complete microbiological eradication is a major, major challenge.
And finally, how do we prevent this thing from getting around, especially in high-risk places like CF centers?
The biggest problem we face is the iceberg effect. Because our routine cultures miss the organism so often, there's likely a large, completely unidentified reservoir of patients who are colonized. And that means reactive infection control, waiting until you have a positive result, is just not going to be enough.
The most actionable thing on this list, the place where we can make the biggest difference, is that preventing transmission actually starts in the lab. Working to improve our detection, just by extending those incubation times, is the first and most critical step in any effective control strategy. You simply can't control what you can't see.
And all of this leaves us with a really big forward-looking question, doesn't it? As we get better and better at finding this elusive pathogen, especially with molecular tools, how are our strategies for routine screening and prevention going to have to evolve to keep up?
You know, the story of Inquilinus limitosis is still being written, and every bit of shared clinical experience is vital for moving forward. So please subscribe for more explainers like this. But even more importantly, if you have experience with this pathogen in your lab or your clinic, share it in the comments. Let's build our collective knowledge together. Thanks so much for watching.